The morning sunlight filtered through the mist that hung over Napa Valley, tinting the vineyards gold. 2 months had passed since Joshua Bennett's funeral, and yet the ache inside Elena hadn't dulled. She drove in silence along Silverado Trail, her hand steady on the wheel, her heart anything but. The GPS led her to a narrow road lined with olive trees, ending at a small law office tucked behind an old winery. On the brass plate by the door, she read, Alan Ramirez, attorney at law. Inside, everything smelled faintly of cedar and coffee. Dr. Ramirez rose from behind his desk as she entered, his expression both kind and careful, the kind of expression people use when they don't know how to speak to the grieving. Mrs. Bennett, he said softly, thank you for coming. Elena nodded, removing her sunglasses. You said there were documents Joshua left unfinished. Yes, Ramirez said, opening a dark leather folder. But one in particular was meant only for you. From the folder, he produced a sealed ivory envelope, heavy in his hand, along with a small iron key, old-fashioned, the kind that might open a chest or a gate long forgotten. Her pulse quickened. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakable. Joshua's, bold, deliberate, each letter written by a man who always believed in permanence. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside, a single sheet of thick paper and the faint scent of his cologne. My dear Elena, if you're reading this, I am gone, and the promise I made you keep no longer protects you. The key belongs to the Aviary estate, the house in the hills. You once asked me why I forbade you to go there. The truth is, I wasn't ready for you to see what it had become. I rebuilt it for you. Her breath caught. The aviary. Years ago, Joshua had mentioned that old family property buried deep in the Northern Valley. But every time she'd ask to visit, his face would harden. Promise me you'll never go there, Elena. Not while I'm alive. He'd said it with such weight that she never questioned him again. Until now. Dr. Ramirez spoke quietly, as though afraid to disturb her thoughts. There's more you should know. Joshua's brothers, Richard, Peter, and Samuel, have filed a petition. They're contesting the will, claiming he wasn't of sound mind when he made these decisions. Elena folded the letter carefully, pressing it against her chest. They would. Her voice was low, controlled, but her knuckles whitened around the envelope. They always thought they were entitled to everything he built. Ramirez nodded. I'll handle the legal side. But if you plan to visit that property, he hesitated, be cautious. It's isolated. Joshua kept it off the public record for privacy reasons. Elena slipped the key into her palm. It was cold, heavier than she expected. He kept secrets, Alan. But I need to know why. The lawyer studied her face for a moment before saying quietly, then you'll find your answers there. Outside, the valley had begun to hum with afternoon life. Tourists laughing near the vineyards, the faint buzz of tractors in the distance. But to Elena, the world felt muted. She stood beside her car, holding the letter, the key pressing against her skin like a pulse. 2 months ago, she had buried her husband, believing she knew every part of his life. Now, standing in the soft California light, she realized how much he had kept hidden. A secret house, a key, a promise he'd made her swear to keep. And now, from beyond the grave, he was asking her to break it. As she started the engine, a single thought cut through the fog of grief. Whatever waits behind that door, it's something he wanted me to see. And she would. By the time Elena reached the northern ridge of Napa Valley, the sun was beginning to fall behind the redwoods, bleeding amber light across the hills. The road narrowed into a private lane, half swallowed by vines and wild grasses. A wooden sign, faded but carved with care. Read the Aviary. She stopped the car and stepped out, the silence almost sacred. No hum of traffic, no voices, just the rustle of leaves and the distant trill of unseen birds. The estate appeared slowly through the trees, as if it had been waiting to be found. The structure was unlike anything she'd imagined. A house built of glass and cedar, its lines clean and modern, yet deeply human. The sunlight glinted off the wide windows, reflecting the green of the vineyards below and the deep crimson of autumn leaves above. Every detail felt deliberate, designed by Joshua's steady hand. Elena's throat tightened. He had done this all in secret. While she thought he was traveling for work, he had been here, creating the sanctuary. The key fit perfectly into the front door's lock, and the faint click echoed through the quiet. As she stepped inside, the air smelled faintly of pine and something floral orchids. Hundreds of them. The entryway opened into a grand room surrounded by floor-to-ceiling glass walls, and everywhere she looked, there were orchids, painted, pressed, or blooming in delicate ceramic pots. Then she noticed the canvases. The walls were covered in paintings, oil, watercolor, charcoal, all of them hers. Her style, her brushwork. But these weren't hers. They were Joshua's versions of her art. His attempts to capture the flowers she'd once painted obsessively in her 20s. Before she gave up teaching to care for him, he'd been watching her work, studying it, honoring it. A lump formed in her throat. On a long oak table by the window sat a single white orchid in full bloom, beside a sleek silver laptop and a small engraved plaque that read, "For Elena." Her breath trembled as she reached for it. The laptop whirred to life, the glow of the screen reflecting in her eyes. Just as she moved to open the only visible folder, labeled "If you're here," a sound broke through the silence. Gravel crunching outside. Elena froze. Through the glass wall, she saw the unmistakable gleam of a black SUV pulling up the driveway. The license plate, the polished rims, she knew them. It was Richard's car. Her heart pounded as the doors opened one by one. Richard, tall and confident. Peter, always composed, and Samuel, following a step behind like a shadow. Even from inside, she could sense their purpose. They didn't come to grieve. They came to take. "Are you sure she doesn't know?" Peter's voice carried faintly through the open air. Richard laughed under his breath. "Please, Elena never had the stomach for business. She'll fold once we explain what's best for the family." Elena moved quietly, slipping into the hallway beside the staircase. From behind a curtain, she watched them pace the gravel drive, pointing at the house, the vines, the surrounding land like men dividing a map. Her hands clenched at her sides. The last time she'd seen them was at Joshua's funeral, where they'd delivered polite condolences and avoided eye contact. Now, 2 months later, they arrived like vultures circling fresh inheritance. "Joshua always said this place was worthless," Samuel murmured. Richard smirked. "He lied about a lot of things, didn't he?" Their laughter cut through the stillness. Cruel and confident, Elena closed her eyes, remembering the tone in Joshua's voice years ago when she had asked about his brothers. "Promise me, Elena, whatever happens, never let them near you or near what's mine. They destroy everything they touch." She had thought he was exaggerating. Now, standing inside the glass house that reflected the dying sun, she understood he hadn't been warning her about greed in general. He had been warning her about them. And outside, the men he once called family were already circling the aviary, looking for a way in. Night fell quietly over the valley, washing the aviary in deep shades of indigo and silver. The vineyards below were silhouettes, and the redwoods stood like sentinels in the mist. Elena sat at the oak table, the only light coming from the laptop screen. She hesitated before typing in the password she'd guessed instinctively, the date of their first date, followed by the word hope. The screen flickered. A folder appeared for Elena. Her breath caught as she clicked. The video opened with a soft chime, and then there he was, Joshua, alive, smiling, sitting in what looked like this very room. The sunlight behind him filled the space with warmth. "If you're watching this," he began, his voice steady, calm, "it means I'm gone. And if you're sitting in this house, it means you didn't listen to me when I told you to stay away. I knew you wouldn't. That's why I built this for you anyway." Elena leaned forward, her fingers trembling. Joshua looked so real, so close that for a moment she felt she could reach through the screen and touch him. His smile faded slightly as he continued. "I should have told you sooner. The truth is, I was diagnosed with a cerebral aneurysm 5 years ago. It runs in the family. The doctor said it could rupture in a decade or in a day. I didn't want to make you live under that shadow. So I kept working, kept pretending I was fine, while I built something that would last beyond me." Elena's throat tightened. She remembered the headaches, the fatigue he'd brushed off as stress. He had known all along. "The Aviary," Joshua said, glancing around the room, "isn't just a house. It's the first place I ever felt peace as a boy. My father sold it after my mother died. Before he passed, I bought it back quietly. I wanted to give it a new life, one that belonged to you. It's legally in your name now. I made sure of that." He looked down, gathering his thoughts. "You used to tell me orchids were stubborn, that they only bloomed when they felt safe. I wanted to build you a place where you could bloom again." Her tears fell silently, one after another, as his image froze on the last frame, his soft, hopeful smile caught in the glow of the screen. Outside, the sound of tires on gravel broke her trance. Headlights swept across the glass walls. Elena turned toward the window. The Bennett brothers were back, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Their voices echoed, faintly angry, urgent. "Richard, this is trespassing." Peter hissed. Richard ignored him. "If she's inside, we'll force her out. The property's contested. We have every right." A car door slammed. Then another set of headlights approached from the opposite direction. A patrol car. Relief flooded through her. Within minutes, a county sheriff deputy stepped out, his flashlight steady as he approached the group. "Evening, gentlemen. Got a call about a disturbance." Richard turned, playing the part of the wronged heir. "We're just retrieving family property. My late brother's widow has locked herself inside. This place belongs to the estate." Elena opened the front door just enough for her voice to carry. "That's a lie." She stepped out, clutching the legal folder Joshua had left, the county seal embossed on its cover. "This property is titled under my name. You can verify it." The deputy took the documents, scanning them under his light. Then he nodded. "She's right. This transfer was recorded 6 months before Mr. Bennett's passing. That makes her the legal owner." Richard's jaw tightened. Peter muttered something under his breath. "You heard him," the deputy added. "You're trespassing. I suggest you leave." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then Richard turned sharply, motioning for his brothers to follow. Their SUV reversed down the driveway, tires grinding against the gravel until the sound faded into the night. Elena closed the door, her hand still trembling. The laptop's glow still lingered in the room. Joshua's frozen smile watching over her. They had come for what was his. But tonight, she defended what was hers. The morning light spilled gently through the glass walls of the aviary, wrapping the room in a pale golden glow. The storm of last night had passed, leaving behind a silence that felt almost sacred. Elena stood by the wide window, coffee untouched, watching mist drift lazily through the redwoods. Her nerves were still frayed from the confrontation with the brothers, but the house, Joshua's house, seemed to breathe with quiet reassurance as if protecting her. A soft knock startled her. When she opened the door, a woman stood there, a Latina in her late 50s, her hands rough from years of gardening, her eyes kind but cautious. "Mrs. Bennett," she asked. "My name's Teresa Lopez. I was hired by your husband to take care of the orchids." Elena blinked, surprised. "You worked for Joshua?" "Yes, ma'am. For years," Teresa said, stepping hesitantly inside. "He asked me to come by every month to keep the greenhouse alive. I didn't know he had passed until now. Her gaze softened with sympathy. He was a good man, always quiet, but when he talked about you, his whole face would change. Elena's throat tightened. You said you came here every month? For almost 4 years, Teresa nodded, her expression distant with memory, even when he got sick. Some days he'd just sit on that bench near the orchids, watching them bloom. He said they reminded him of you, how you always took care of things that were delicate, but never weak. Elena followed her through the back of the house, where sunlight filtered through rows of glass panels. The greenhouse was breathtaking, hundreds of orchids in full bloom, their colors ranging from ivory to violet. The air was warm and faintly sweet, humming with quiet life. On one of the tables sat a small wooden box with a brass latch. Teresa hesitated before opening it. Inside was a folded note in Joshua's handwriting. Show her the room when she's ready. What room? Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. Teresa smiled faintly. Follow me. She led her down a narrow corridor, past a row of shelves, to what appeared to be an unmarked wall panel. Teresa pressed a hidden button beneath the counter, and a section of the wall slid open with a soft hiss. Beyond it was a staircase leading down to a cool, dimly lit space. Elena descended slowly, her heart pounding. When the lights flickered on, she gasped. It was an art studio, spacious, serene, and unmistakably hers. Canvases stood on easels, blank and waiting. The shelves were lined with oils, brushes, and sketchbooks, every item arranged with almost obsessive precision. On one wall hung a series of framed paintings she didn't recognize at first, until she stepped closer. They were hers, her old university paintings, pieces she'd sold at student exhibitions or thought had been lost when they moved years ago. Joshua had found them all, restored them, and hung them here as if they had always belonged in this place. Elena pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. 15 years. He had been saving her work for 15 years, waiting for her to return to it. Tears blurred her vision as she turned in a slow circle, overwhelmed by the tenderness in every detail. The soft lighting, the brushes sorted by size, the faint smell of linseed oil. Joshua hadn't just built her a house. He had built her a sanctuary. She sank into the old leather chair by the easel, the weight of love and loss folding over her like a wave. For the first time in months, her tears weren't from grief, but gratitude. Then, a sound shattered the stillness, the crunch of tires on gravel. Elena froze. She climbed the stairs, heart racing, and peered through the glass wall of the living room. A car door slammed. Through the sunlight, she saw Claire stepping out of the passenger seat. Her daughter's figure was familiar, her expression distant. And behind her, climbing out of a sleek black SUV, were Richard, Peter, and Samuel Bennett. The peace Joshua had built around her began to tremble, as the past she thought she'd escaped came marching straight to her door. The morning air inside the aviary felt fragile, like the calm before a storm. Elena stood near the tall windows, her reflection fragmented by the glass as she watched the black SUV roll to a stop in the driveway. The same one from before. This time, it wasn't just the Bennett brothers who stepped out, it was Claire. Her daughter's posture was stiff, her movements too composed for someone coming home. When Claire entered, she hesitated for only a second before walking straight to her mother. The embrace that followed was quick, cold, obligatory. "Mom," she said, her tone cautious but distant. I think we should talk." Behind her, Richard smiled with the kind of warmth that never reached his eyes. "Elena, we're not here to cause trouble," he began smoothly. "We just want to make things right for everyone." Peter carried a leather folder, his expression unreadable, while Samuel hovered near the doorway, head down, avoiding her gaze. Elena glanced from one to the other, her stomach tightening. "Make things right," she repeated, crossing her arms. Joshua's will was clear. This estate belongs to me. Richard gave a sympathetic sigh, as if speaking to a stubborn child. No one's questioning that, at least not entirely. But you know how emotional Josh could be near the end. He wasn't thinking straight. It's not fair that his family, his blood, was left with nothing. Nothing. Elena's voice sharpened. He gave you all decades of forgiveness. That's more than you deserved. Claire flinched. Mom, please don't start. She glanced at her uncles, then back at her mother. They're just asking for a fair division. 3 ways. Uncle Richard said it would avoid court. That's reasonable, isn't it? The words hit Elena like a slap. Her daughter's eyes, once so trusting, were clouded with doubt. She could see how easily grief had made her malleable, how the brothers had exploited her love for family and peace. Peter stepped forward, sliding the folder onto the table. This is the proposal. Equal shares, Elena. No lawyers, no press, no public mess. It's better for everyone. Elena didn't even look at the papers. My husband wasn't irrational, she said quietly but firmly. He knew exactly what he was doing, and exactly who he was protecting me from. Richard's smile thinned. Be careful with that tone. You're talking about Joshua's family. I'm talking about men who betrayed him more than once, she shot back. He trusted me with his legacy because he knew you'd come for it the moment he was gone. The silence that followed was heavy. Claire shifted uncomfortably, her voice barely above a whisper. Mom, you're making this harder than it has to be. Elena looked at her daughter, the ache behind her sternness finally breaking through. And you're letting them make you believe he didn't trust you either. That's not who your father was. Before anyone could answer, a voice came from the hallway. She's right. They all turned. Teresa Lopez stood there, her work gloves still on, her eyes fierce. Mr. Bennett told me this might happen. He left something for Mrs. Bennett, something meant to be shown only if things ever turned hostile. Richard's face darkened. Who are you? The woman your brother trusted, Teresa replied evenly. More than he trusted you. For a moment, no one moved. The air between them vibrated with tension. Then, Richard snorted, forcing a smirk. This is absurd. Come on. We're wasting time. He turned sharply toward the door. Peter followed, muttering under his breath, while Samuel lingered just long enough to give Claire a pitying look before leaving. When the door finally shut, silence filled the house again. Claire stood frozen, torn between guilt and confusion. Elena turned to Teresa, her heart pounding. What did he leave? Teresa removed her gloves, her expression grave. He said it would explain everything, but he wanted you to see it only when you were ready. I think now is that time. Elena didn't respond. She only glanced out the window, where the brothers' SUV disappeared down the drive, knowing this piece, like every other one, would not last. The air in the greenhouse was thick with humidity and the faint perfume of orchids when Teresa motioned for Elena to follow her. The older woman's hands were steady, but there was a tension in the way she moved, a kind of reverence mixed with urgency. Your husband said you'd know when the moment came, Teresa murmured. He asked me to keep the key hidden until then. She led Elena past rows of vibrant orchids into a far corner where the glass panes met an old stone wall. There, half hidden behind climbing vines, was a small wooden door, weathered and unassuming. Teresa inserted a narrow brass key and turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a stairway that descended into darkness. Elena hesitated, heart pounding. The air that drifted up was cool and dry, carrying the faint scent of oak and dust. She took the first step, then another, her hand brushing against the rough wall for balance. Teresa followed with a small flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom until they reached a heavy iron door at the bottom. This, Teresa whispered, is where he spent most of his time during the last year. Elena pushed the door open, and her breath caught. It was a vault, but not the kind that held wine. The room stretched out in neat precision, its walls lined with metal filing cabinets. Shelves stacked with boxes labeled in Joshua's meticulous handwriting. A long work table sat in the center, scattered with maps, blueprints, and manila folders. On the far wall hung a large corkboard filled with photographs, newspaper clippings, and printed emails connected by red string. The low hum of a dehumidifier was the only sound. Elena stepped forward, running her fingers across the table. Every surface bore Joshua's presence, his order, his control, his mind at work. Teresa handed her a folder labeled Montana Estates Group Expansion Plans. Inside were maps of the valley, property lines, and development phases. One section was highlighted in red. The Aviary estate sat directly in the middle of Phase 2, the proposed golf course and resort expansion that would have tripled the company's value. Elena frowned. So this was never about family. They wanted the land. Teresa nodded solemnly. Your husband knew it. He told me they'd stop at nothing to get it back. As she sifted through the documents, Elena found detailed notes in Joshua's handwriting, records of meetings, names, dates, offshore accounts. Then another file, Bennett Holdings internal transfers. Inside were spreadsheets and copies of transactions that made her blood run cold. Her late husband had uncovered everything. There were bank records proving Richard had embezzled funds from their father's company years ago. Emails showing Peter's law firm had laundered the money through shell corporations. And witness statements connecting Samuel to insider trading using confidential investment reports. Joshua had documented all of it. Every crime, every false signature, every betrayal. Pinned to the corkboard was a note written in Joshua's handwriting. If they ever come for what's yours, you'll have the truth. Use it wisely. Elena sank into the chair at the center of the room, staring at the evidence of her husband's foresight. For years she had thought of him as distant, withdrawn, hiding something from her. But now she saw the truth. He hadn't been retreating. He had been preparing. Her heart swelled with a strange mixture of sorrow and pride. Joshua hadn't just left her a home. He had left her a weapon, disguised as an archive. Teresa spoke, softly behind her. He didn't want revenge, Mrs. Bennett. He wanted you to have protection. He said you'd know when to act. Elena looked up at the corkboard again, the red strings crisscrossing like veins of intent. He was right, she whispered. They won't stop until they have everything. But now, she glanced at the evidence spread before her, the thousands of quiet truths Joshua had preserved. Now I know how to stop them. Teresa's flashlight flickered across the concrete wall, illuminating a phrase Joshua had painted there himself in faint white letters. Not every battle is fought in daylight. Elena stood slowly, her resolve hardening. She understood what her husband meant. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about strategy, about finishing what he'd started. For the first time since Joshua's death, she felt steady, focused. She would not strike blindly. She would wait, and when the time came, she would make every piece of his work count. And when the brothers came again, as she knew they would find that the aviary was not just Joshua's creation. It was his fortress, and now it was hers. The next morning, the valley shimmered under a pale sun, the air heavy with the scent of harvest season. Elena sat alone in a cafe in downtown Napa, its wide windows overlooking Main Street. She stirred her untouched cappuccino, glancing at the door every few seconds. She wasn't sure if her daughter would come. Then, at last, Claire appeared, her hair tied back neatly, her steps hesitant but purposeful. She looked tired, as though sleep had been a luxury she hadn't allowed herself. When she reached the table, she didn't sit immediately. Uncle Richard told me you were planning to cut ties with the family, she said softly. Her tone caught somewhere between accusation and uncertainty. Elena's heart ached. "Sit down, sweetheart. Please." Reluctantly, Claire lowered herself into the chair opposite her. The distance between them felt greater than the width of the table. "I didn't ask you here to argue," Elena said, sliding her laptop from her bag. "I need to show you something your father left for you." Claire frowned. "For me?" Elena nodded and turned the screen toward her. On it was a folder labeled, "For Claire, when you need to know." With trembling fingers, she pressed play. The screen flickered to life. Joshua's face appeared alive, strong, and smiling with that familiar warmth that used to light up their home. Claire gasped, a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "Hi, kiddo," Joshua began, his voice gentle. "If you're watching this, it means your mom finally decided it was time. I wanted to tell you something I should have said a long time ago." He paused, as if weighing every word. "You've probably heard a lot about my brothers, about how close we used to be. The truth is, they stopped being my brothers when I was 19. After Dad died, they forged documents and took every cent of my inheritance. When I found out, I threatened to go to the police. They begged me not to, promised to return it. Instead, they destroyed the evidence and shut me out of the family business." Claire's hand flew to her mouth. Joshua's eyes on the screen softened. "I built my own life from nothing. That's how Bennett Engineering began. But the betrayal never left me. I didn't want you or your mother to live with that ugliness. So I told her very little, and I told you nothing. I thought I was protecting you. Maybe that was my mistake." He took a long breath. "If they ever try to make you doubt me, remember this. Greed doesn't always wear horns. Sometimes it wears a suit and smiles. Don't let them take from you what I fought to build." The video ended, leaving only the reflection of Claire's face on the dark screen, tear-streaked, pale, and shaken. She sat in silence for a long moment, her breath shallow. "They lied to me," she whispered. "They made it sound like you, like Dad was the greedy one." Elena reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. "Your father wasn't hiding the truth from us, Claire. He was protecting us from them, from the fight he knew would come one day." Claire wiped her eyes roughly. "I thought they cared about family, about keeping peace. But it was always about control." Her voice trembled, but anger was beginning to sharpen her grief into something else. Resolve. Elena nodded. "Now you see why we can't let them win." For the first time in weeks, their eyes met without distance. Claire straightened, her jaw firm. "Tell me what to do." Elena exhaled slowly, the tension in her chest easing for the first time. "We start by meeting with Dr. Ramirez. And then," she slid a small folder across the table, "we talk to the CEO of Montana Estates Group. It's time the right people know the truth." Claire looked down at the folder, then back at her mother. "Dad thought he could protect us alone," she said quietly. "He was wrong. But together, we can finish what he started." Elena squeezed her daughter's hand. For the first time since Joshua's death, she felt something close to hope. Not the fragile kind that waited for miracles, but the kind that took its first real breath before a storm. 3 days later, the aviary stood in perfect stillness beneath the late afternoon sun. The vineyards shimmered beyond the glass walls, their gold and green waves hiding the storm that was about to unfold inside. Elena had prepared everything with deliberate calm. The long dining table set not with food, but with documents, a projector, and several sealed envelopes. Claire stood beside her, poised and composed, no longer the hesitant daughter torn between loyalty and doubt. Her father's video had changed everything. They were ready. Outside, the crunch of gravel broke the silence. The black SUV appeared again, but this time it carried 4 men. The Bennett brothers stepped out first, Richard leading as always, Peter with his polished attachment, Samuel trailing like a reluctant shadow, and with them, a man in a gray suit carrying a briefcase. "Carlos Moore," Richard announced as they entered, his voice brimming with false courtesy. "Our financial advisor. He's here to help us make a fair offer." Elena motioned for them to sit. "By all means," she said, her tone measured. "Let's discuss fairness." Richard smiled, though his eyes glinted with calculation. "You've made this unnecessarily difficult, Elena. We're offering a generous sum for the property, more than market value. Sign today, and this all ends peacefully." Elena exchanged a glance with Claire before answering. "You mean peacefully for you?" Peter opened his briefcase, sliding out a stack of papers. "These are binding agreements, reviewed by counsel. You'll retain a portion of the estate's value, of course, but a sale is best for everyone. Montana Estates needs the land, and the resort expansion will—" "Cut straight through this property," Elena interrupted. "Yes, I'm aware." Peter blinked, momentarily thrown off. Before he could respond, a soft mechanical hum filled the air. A screen descended from the ceiling, projecting an illuminated map of the valley. Claire picked up the remote and clicked to the next slide, a high-resolution blueprint of Montana Estates Group's Phase 2 expansion plan. The red outline of the proposed golf course ran directly through the Aviary estate. Gasps rippled through the room. Richard's voice hardened. "Where did you get that?" "From your brother," Elena said evenly. "He documented everything before he died. He knew you'd come for this land. What he didn't know was how far you'd go to get it." At that moment, the door opened. Two men entered. The first, Dr. Alan Ramirez, her lawyer, and beside him, a tall man in a navy suit with the confident bearing of someone used to being obeyed. "Paul Rivera, CEO of Montana Estates Group," Dr. Ramirez announced. The brothers stiffened, exchanging wary glances. Rivera's expression was unreadable as he walked toward the table. "Mrs. Bennett contacted me 3 days ago," he said. "She requested a private review of our expansion contracts. What I found was concerning." He gestured toward the screen. "According to our records, this property was marked as pending acquisition, signed by a corporate intermediary called Bennett Holdings. That company," he turned to Richard and Peter, "was created using falsified documents and forged signatures from your deceased brother. Your names appear on every transfer." Peter's face went pale. "That's absurd," Rivera cut him off. "We've verified the filings. The evidence speaks for itself." Elena opened the briefcase beside her and began sliding sealed folders across the table. One to Rivera, one to her lawyer, and 3 to the brothers. "These," she said quietly, "are my husband's records. Bank statements, emails, and signed affidavits. Copies are already in the hands of the county district attorney, should anything happen to me or my daughter." The room fell into an almost physical silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the projector. Samuel shifted uneasily. "Joshua wouldn't have done this. He wouldn't destroy his own family." Elena looked at him, her gaze unflinching. "He didn't destroy you. He gave you a chance to stop. You just never took it." Richard's jaw clenched, his mask of control slipping. For the first time, the arrogance drained from his face, replaced by something raw fear. Rivera closed the folder in front of him and stood, effective immediately. "Montana Estates is suspending all collaboration with Bennett Holdings. Any future negotiations will be conducted directly with Mrs. Bennett." He nodded once to Elena. "You have my respect, ma'am." As he and the lawyer left, the silence deepened. The brothers sat motionless, staring at the folders in front of them like men realizing the ground beneath them had vanished. Elena reached for the remote and turned off the screen. The room dimmed, leaving them in muted light. "You wanted to talk about fairness," she said, her voice calm but final. "Now you understand it." No one replied. The empire they'd built on deceit had just been exposed, right where their brother had once warned them it would end. The silence that followed was dense, like the air before a thunderstorm. Outside, The late afternoon sun stretched long across the vineyard, casting golden light through the glass walls of the dining room. Inside, every eye was fixed on Elena. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone knew it. Paul Rivera, the CEO, adjusted his cufflinks before speaking. "Mrs. Bennett," he said, his tone measured, "Montana Estates officially withdraws any prior negotiations made through Bennett Holdings. From this moment forward, we will conduct all future discussions exclusively with you." Richard's head snapped up. "You can't just—" Rivera cut him off, unflinching. "I can, and I have. Your company falsified documents, manipulated investors, and breached multiple state laws. Frankly, Mr. Bennett, you're lucky I'm not filing a civil complaint right now." Peter exhaled sharply, his composure crumbling. Samuel stared at the table, silent. Elena met Rivera's gaze. "Thank you, Mr. Rivera. That's all we needed." He nodded once, collected his folder, and left with Dr. Ramirez. The door closed behind them with a soft but decisive click. The brothers were alone now, with the two women they had underestimated the most. Claire stepped forward before her mother could speak. Her voice was steady, clear. "You always said Dad was weak," she began, looking at her uncles one by one. "That he ruined the family business. But I saw the truth. He didn't destroy it, you did." Peter looked away, but Richard tried to recover his smug tone. "Claire, you're young. You don't understand how business works." "I understand theft," she shot back. "I understand greed. You stole from your father when you were barely older than I am now. And when Dad found out, you made him out to be the villain. You isolated him, humiliated him, and then tried to erase his legacy. Well," she straightened her shoulders, "it didn't work." Richard's mouth opened, but no words came. Elena took the folder from the table and placed it between them. "This," she said quietly, "is what's going to happen. You will withdraw all claims to the Aviary and any other Bennett estate assets. Effective immediately. You'll sign the legal documents my lawyer prepared, and you'll never contact me or my daughter again." Richard's jaw tightened. "And if we don't?" Elena's eyes didn't waver. "Then this evidence goes public, every transaction, every forged signature, every offshore account. Joshua gathered enough proof to bury all three of you in court, and trust me, I will use it if I have to." For a moment, no one breathed. Finally, Peter reached for the pen with trembling fingers. "Give me the papers." He signed first, his name a shaky scrawl across the page. Samuel followed without a word, tears glistening in his eyes. Richard lingered, glaring at Elena as though he could still intimidate her. But when he looked up and met her gaze, he saw something that stopped him cold. Not rage, not triumph, but quiet conviction. He signed. Elena gathered the papers and closed the folder with deliberate calm. "You can leave now." The brothers stood, their movements slow, drained of arrogance. As they walked toward the door, the vineyard light reflected across their faces. Three men stripped of power, walking out of the house their brother built, never to return. When the SUV disappeared down the drive, Teresa stepped into the room. She had been waiting quietly by the doorway, unseen, her apron still dusted with soil. Her eyes were warm, proud. "He'd be proud," she said softly. Elena turned toward the windows, watching the sun dip lower over the vines, painting the hills in amber. Her voice trembled, but her words carried strength. "He fought for this place with everything he had. Today we finished what he started." The light faded to gold, and for the first time since Joshua's death, the Aviary felt at peace, no longer a secret, no longer a burden, but the home he had meant it to be. The evening light spilled across the valley like liquid gold, washing over the vineyards and the glass walls of the Aviary. The world had quieted since the confrontation. The lawsuits had vanished as quickly as the brothers themselves, and for the first time in months, the house no longer felt haunted by unfinished battles. It felt alive, Elena stood on the balcony overlooking the orchard. A soft breeze, stirring the scent of orchids, drifting up from the greenhouse below. Inside, laughter echoed faintly. Claire, organizing the art studio her father had built so many years ago. It had become their shared ritual now, mother and daughter side by side, restoring what Joshua once imagined. When the sun began to sink, Claire appeared at the door. "Mom," she said, her voice gentle, "there's one last video." Elena hesitated for a moment, then nodded. They walked together to the study, where Joshua's laptop still sat in its place on the desk, the white orchid he had left now pressed and framed beside it. Claire clicked the file labeled Final Message. Joshua's face filled the screen, bathed in warm light. His eyes held the same calm strength Elena remembered from their first years together, a quiet conviction that never needed to shout to be felt. "If you're seeing this," he began, "it means everything is where it should be. The aviary, the orchids, the studio, they were never meant to be your inheritance. They're your tools to rediscover yourself." Elena's breath caught. Joshua smiled faintly on the screen. "Elena, you stopped painting the day we lost our first child. I never pushed you because I knew art was tied to everything you couldn't bear to feel. But I built this place hoping you'd find your way back. Every orchid, every brush, every inch of this estate, it's part of you. I just gave it shape." Claire's eyes glistened. Joshua's voice softened further. "And Claire, I wanted you to know what honesty looks like, even when it costs everything. This estate isn't just land. It's truth made visible. Promise me you'll guard it together. Promise me you'll live here, not for me, but for yourselves." The video ended quietly, the screen fading to black. Neither woman spoke for a long time. Outside, the first stars began to appear. Later that evening, the two of them stood in the studio, surrounded by brushes, paints, and canvases that had been waiting for 15 years. Elena picked up a brush, her hand trembling slightly. Then she dipped it into the paint, blue first, the color of memory, and began to move across the canvas. Hours passed without words. Claire watched her mother work, the strokes transforming from hesitation to flow, from grief to release. When the painting finally took shape, the scene was simple but luminous. 3 figures in the vineyard at dusk, Joshua standing in the center, holding a blue orchid, offering it to Elena and Claire. It was as if the estate itself had breathed the image into existence. When it dried, they carried the canvas together into the great hall. The setting sun streamed through the tall windows, and as they hung it on the wall above the grand staircase, the light hit it just right, the blue orchid glowing, the figures bathed in gold. Elena stepped back, her heart full but steady. Claire slipped an arm around her mother's shoulders. For a long time they stood in silence, the air humming softly with the sound of the vineyard outside, the wind through the vines, the faint rustle of life continuing. Then Elena whispered, her voice almost carried away by the breeze, "Legacy isn't what we leave behind. It's what keeps growing through love." The last of the sunlight caught the edge of the painting, and for a fleeting moment, Joshua's painted smile seemed to glow, quiet, eternal, and alive. The aviary had fulfilled its purpose. It was no longer a secret or a refuge, it was a beginning. And as the evening fell, mother and daughter stood together beneath its golden light, knowing that what he built would never fade, because it lived on in them.